I'm very pleased to be interviewing Bill Harvey, who is co-founder as well as Vice Chairman, Chief Research Officer for TRA. Thank you for your time today, Bill.
Thank you.
Let's start with your background. How did you get to where you are today?
Well, I started in show business as a child because my parents were in show business. Then I got a degree in philosophy, and then I went looking for a job. And I was lucky enough, by the kindness of the universe, to wind up in media research at Gray Advertising, working for people like Helen Johnston and other wonderful mentors that I had along the way. So I wound up being media research manager at Kenyon and Eckhart after Gray, and then at Interpublic, where I ran a thing called the Applied Science Division, which was, in a way, something very much like TRA. It was trying to estimate purchaser targets and ROI, but it was all based on modeling. It wasn't real data. It used real data, but it extrapolated quite a bit. And that was a kind of a clue into what my interests were as a media researcher. I was interested in going beyond, today they say beyond the click. I was always trying to get beyond the eyeballs to what's the real business building effect of advertising, and how can we measure that and then plan and buy based on it rather than on this surrogate of eyeballs.
Let's talk about the beginning of TRA, as you're a founder of TRA. How did it all start?
Well, it started with the idea of single source. Single source being the measurement of both purchases and media exposure and advertising exposure on the same households, so that you can look at cause and effect. Somebody sees an ad, changes their buying behavior. And you can also buy programs that reach certain types of purchasers and don't need to use the sex age surrogate. So it moves away from eyeballs and it moves into real ROI-based buying and planning. So people had been trying single source for many years before TRA, and things like AdTel, Scan America, Apollo, all were brilliantly exciting flashes in the pan that then went out of business. And they all went out of business for the same reason. I had been involved with Scan America in the early stages of Apollo. And so I was very interested in trying to figure out why were they continuing to fail, and how could we build a single source that wouldn't fail, which is what TRA is. And the reason why single source didn't work was it was economically unaffordable, because you had to put barcode scanning equipment in people's homes and people meter equipment in people's homes. You had to pay them to do a lot of work, and you never got to more than the 5,000 sample, which was not going to be adequate, with the average rating being under a 1 and brand shares being about the same. So it was all too fragmented for 5,000 sample to work for anything but maybe Tide and a couple other giant brands. So I thought, how can we do this? How can we collect data without having to put equipment in people's homes? How can we get the same thing as Scan America and Apollo were trying to do? And in 1997, Next Century Media, my company, did the first set-top box measurement. That was in Atlanta with 10 top advertisers and their agencies. And we linked the tuning measurements we were getting from the set-top box data to some purchase data, happened to be from RL Polk, automotive purchase data. And that gave me the idea, well, if we could do that, we would have single source. Now all we have to do is be able to do that for other product categories besides cars, and we're in business. And that idea was kind of tumbling around my mind for many years. And then in late 2004, Mark contacted me, and I had met Mark during his Diva days, and he said, somebody has just contacted me who wants to create a next generation TV measurement system, and they'd like to invest in it. And so I'm contacting you, Bill, as somebody who knows exactly how to do that, I'm assuming. And he said, would you like to have breakfast and we'll talk about it, which we did, and kind of the rest is history.
So you've known Mark Lieberman, who's the other co-founder of TRA, for a while, and I believe you were envisioning addressable advertising many years before it became really a generally accepted term. Can you talk a little bit about your ideas in the early days for addressable advertising?
Well, Next Century Media was formed in 1993 in order to provide addressable advertising. And the approach, the technological approach, was very similar to what NVIDIA is doing now in Visible World. In fact, some of the people at NVIDIA had initially worked at Next Century Media. And it was too early. I mean, even in the case of NVIDIA and Visible World, they're still trying to roll out in the cable industry and the satellite industry and telco TV. So back in the 90s, we were way early, but we helped popularize the concepts, and that led us to being able to do set-top box measurement, which was, you know, an important component, obviously, in TRA's realization. And Mark and I, Mark had the first video-on-demand company, Diva, and he and I both had, Diva and Next Century Media both had relationships with Sarnoff Media Labs. And so Sarnoff introduced us, and our idea was we were going to make video-on-demand addressable. He had the video-on-demand part, I had the addressable part, and we were going to put those together. Somehow we never got to do that in the fullness of time, but today we're doing it. We're starting, you know, with television as it is. It's not addressable yet. We hope it will get to be addressable, but what TRA does is it gets you halfway to the economic benefit in terms of the purchaser reach as you can get to with real addressability. When you can get down to the household, you'll obviously be able to cut out more waste than when you can just pick programs more intelligently based on TRA. But we get you halfway to addressability.